Hi, I'm Dr. Joel Minden, licensed clinical psychologist and author of Show Your Anxiety Who's Boss. And I'm here to answer some questions about my book. The first question is anxiety. What is it? What is the nature of it? And how does it differ from fear? The answer is that anxiety is a future-oriented emotional response to a predicted threat. Put simply, when you anticipate that something bad will happen, especially if you believe that the bad event will be catastrophic and you won't be able to cope, you're likely to feel anxious. In contrast, fear is the response to an immediate or true threat. For example, if you're on the freeway and the driver in front of you suddenly hits their brakes, you'd experience fear. And it's a good thing you feel that way because it's a cue to step on your brake pedal quickly to prevent an accident. Anxiety and fear seem quite similar, but with anxiety, the threat is predicted, and you don't always know for sure whether that prediction is realistic. So this is one of the reasons why anxiety is such a challenging emotion. If you could have complete certainty about the future, you might not feel so anxious, or even if you did, it would be much easier to prepare for upcoming challenges. But the future is always to some extent uncertain, and that can make life exciting, but also anxiety-provoking. When you feel anxious, it's helpful to act like a detective to understand where the anxiety comes from, what it means, and what would be a helpful response. For example, anxiety can sometimes be understood as a helpful cue to action. If you sleep through your alarm and think you might be late for work, anxiety is a good signal to get out of bed, stop looking at your phone, and quickly get ready to leave the house. If you didn't feel anxious, you might go back to sleep or take your time getting ready for work, and I'm sure your employer wouldn't appreciate that so much. You might also interpret anxiety as an annoyance that makes an appearance whenever you're trying to make a good impression in a conversation with someone important, and the emotion unfortunately distracts you from being spontaneous, expressing yourself, and showing interest in the other person. Although you can still get through the conversation successfully, anxiety lives on in the background, kind of like a toddler throwing a tantrum, and you do your best not to get too wrapped up in it. I think this is consistent with the normal experience of anxiety that most of us find ourselves dealing with, at least from time to time. But for some people, in some situations, anxiety can be interpreted that something truly awful is about to happen, and they might believe that anxiety will escalate and be so distressing that they won't be able to tolerate it, that other people will judge them harshly, that they'll experience a serious medical issue, or that something horrible they haven't even considered yet will happen. The consequence of understanding anxiety in this way is avoidance, which means attempting to avoid anxiety either by controlling it directly or by avoiding important situations and activities that might be anxiety-provoking. Examples of avoidance tactics used to try to control anxiety are things like overthinking. So if I think about all the bad things that might happen and what I can do about each one, eventually I'll have nothing to worry about and this anxiety will go away. If only it were that simple. Another is reassurance seeking. If I know everything will be okay, I can finally relax, so I'll keep telling myself that everything will be fine, or I'll ask other people to reassure me, and if I'm still not satisfied, I'll see if my physician or Google or someone else can help me find the reassurance I want. Also, anxiety reduction strategies like if I work out or do some breathing exercises, I'll be able to relax, or destructive things like I need a few cocktails to be able to feel comfortable in social situations. And finally, avoiding situations or activities where there's a lot of uncertainty, like if I go to this concert, I'll have a panic attack, so I'll skip it, or everyone at the gym is going to think I'm weak or out of shape, so I won't go. When you spend too much time and effort trying to control or reduce anxiety, or if you change your life around to distance yourself from anxiety, that's when it's particularly important to explore new ways of relating to this difficult emotion. Although it can be scary and uncomfortable to feel anxious, it is just a feeling, and learning to be flexible in how you understand and respond to anxiety is so important for long-term anxiety management. Second question is it possible to take control over anxiety? Can we actually free ourselves from the influence of anxiety, and what are the best methods of dealing with anxiety? My answer is that anxiety disorders are problems of over-control. In my opinion, trying to take control over anxiety is precisely why so many people continue to struggle with this difficult emotion. We just aren't very good at controlling our inner experience, our physical sensations, thoughts, urges, and feeling labels, especially those private responses that are so well learned and essentially automatic after many years of unintentional practice. So instead of working so hard to control the uncontrollable, learning to accept anxiety for what it is, a challenging but harmless emotional reaction, makes it so much easier to let go of avoidance strategies, tolerate a reasonable amount of uncertainty, and direct your attention and energy toward controlling what you can. Things like making plans, eliminating obstacles, problem solving, and ultimately taking purposeful action to experience greater pleasure and accomplishment, even if anxiety happens to make an appearance. I think what creates problems for so many people is their commitment to controlling or avoiding anxiety. So my book shifts the focus to understanding and responding differently to anxiety. First foundational strategy in the book is to make useful predictions, not anxious fictions. And the anxious fictions are those biased beliefs about the future that we might believe too readily. We overestimate the likelihood that something bad will happen, or we underestimate our ability to cope. And if we accept these ideas, these beliefs as facts, we're at risk for committing even more to avoidance. So instead, we can recognize these biased patterns of thinking and respond with more realistic and useful beliefs to help us prepare more effectively for an upcoming challenge. The second strategy in the book is to take action, demand satisfaction. Here's where it's important to prioritize action over avoidance. If there are important but anxiety-provoking behaviors you tend to avoid, tap into your values, how you want to live your life, and prepare to move gradually toward bigger and more meaningful challenges that you often avoided because of anxiety. When you prioritize value-driven action over avoidance, you create opportunities to learn 3 new things that I think are so important for long-term anxiety management. The first is that anxiety usually declines on its own, even if you do nothing to try to reduce it. The second is that anxiety is tolerable and it's possible to work through the emotion and still function effectively. And the third is that uncertainty is tolerable. We can still take reasonable risks to get on with our lives, even if we don't have all the answers. The third strategy in the book is accept and redirect, and this means that we can be more accepting of anxiety before making the choice to redirect our attention and energy to whatever is more meaningful in the moment. So instead of always understanding anxiety the same way as a threat signal, we can learn to relate to it objectively. So this is how I feel when I anticipate a threat, or as a tolerable annoyance. My brain is determined to remind me that something dangerous could happen, but in this case, I'm better off treating that as background noise and leaving it alone. Or self-compassion. I really want things to go well, and I'm concerned that they won't, and I want to be patient and kind with myself the way I would be with a friend or a family member, and it's okay to have feelings. The third question is, can getting over a particular kind of fear or anxiety help us get over another kind of fear or anxiety? Is it possible to generate anxiety for oneself? Are we susceptible to particular kinds of anxiety, and who is this book for? My answer is that anxiety is a complicated emotion that can emerge in different forms and in different situations, and our life experiences influence how we think about future threats, uncertainty, anxious emotions, and what we should do to cope. For example, if you experience a setback in your life, you might feel anxious about the possibility of suffering through that setback again, and you might learn that some form of avoidance makes you feel maybe a little bit better, at least temporarily. The problem, of course, is that whatever relief you get from avoidance will strengthen the belief that anxiety itself is a threat, and that your best or maybe only way to cope is with more avoidance. Show Your Anxiety Who's Boss highlights the common threads that connect all anxiety-related concerns: thinking biases or resistance to uncertainty and avoidance, so you can use new strategies to address current and specific struggles with anxiety, but you can also apply those same strategies to other anxiety-related challenges that come up in the future. So whether you struggle with worry or panic, uncertainty or avoidance, the strategies in Show Your Anxiety Who's Boss can help you explore new ways of understanding and responding to anxiety so that you can get your life back. Thank you so much for watching. I'm Dr. Joel Minden.